Is the House settlement holding up invites for FCS schools? Let's take a closer look. Realignment is always in the news, so we're back here on the Big Mountain to keep you updated. Hey, welcome back to the Big Mountain. I am JY, wanting to take a closer look at potential FCS invites to FBS conferences. As everyone here knows, we focus on the Mountain West, but this could be for any FBS conference. We have done some deeper dives with FCS schools here recently. First, we had a talk with Josh Wood, one of the co-chairs for the Sac-12 committee, and the noise that Sacramento State is making in their hopes of getting an invite to an FBS conference. We then had a discussion with A.D. Yerzai with Tarleton State. He spoke to us about the university, about the athletics, and the fact that they have had discussions with the Mountain West about potential membership. Lastly, just last week, we did a few episodes on North Dakota State University, the Bison, I've been corrected, about potentially having interest in the Mountain West and vice versa as well. So I wanted to take a step down the road of the House settlement and how that may be playing with invites to specifically here the Mountain West, but any FCS program or conference. I have had sources tell me that the Mountain West is waiting to see what happens with the House settlement prior to finalizing any sort of commitment or invites to help FCS schools move to the FBS level. If the lawsuit and the proposed settlement ends in a positive way for that conference, they could invite one or two FCS schools and then help them with that move financially. If it doesn't go in a positive direction for the Mountain West, they may not be willing to help any FCS program with a move to the FBS. So I want to hear from several individuals. I'm going to play some clips of some interviews that we've had. I want to start here, though, with a new clip that was just out here a few weeks ago. This was from the athletic director of North Carolina A&T. They are an FCS school. His name is Earl Hilton. He went on a podcast here, and I will link the full podcast below. I want to give them all the credit. I will have that information in the description of this video. I'm going to play about a 7 to 8 minute clip that he talks about the House settlement specifically here. He looks at what this allocation back pay is going to mean for all the conferences, but of course he's focused on FCS, which is great because that's what I want to focus on in this video. He also looks at how this could be if it was done via revenues. If the allocation was done via revenues, in his mind, a little bit fairer way of doing things, but that's not what's in the proposed settlement. He also then discusses how these are to be paid to past athletes. I think it's very, very interesting. I'm going to put the clip up right now. Again, it's about 7-8 minutes. Pay attention. He does have some charts. You can see how this all lays out. Really interesting information here, again, from the athletic director of North Carolina A&T, Earl Hilton.
Now, the rub is the percentage of liability that's going to be borne by the various subsections of Division I. As you recall, I indicated that the lawsuit, the plaintiffs, the defendants in the lawsuit, the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences, we were not named in the lawsuit. No FCS school was, no FCS conference was. It was those 5 conferences in the NCAA were the ones who were sued because the plaintiffs correctly understood that the majority of the revenue being generated and not shared with student athletes came out of those 69 schools. The allocation of the $2.8 billion again, the proposal suggests it will follow the following format. The NCAA will eat about 41% of it, $1.1 billion that they'll take out of their generated revenue or their savings or their other resources, $114 million a year over the next 10 years to eat about 41% of that liability. The Autonomous 5, the Power 5, will take about 25% of that liability. The non-Power 5 FBS schools or conferences, the App State, the ECUs, the Charlottes, will take about, what they're saying here is 9%. The football championship subdivision, which is us, FCS, our conferences, will eat about 12%. And then the D1 non-football schools, again, so that is your UNCGs, your UNC Wilmingtons, Division I, but they don't have football. They will eat about 12% of it. Now, this is a proposal in the settlement, but when you back the numbers out and you look at what the revenue looks like, if you allocated liability based on revenue and how much money these schools make, then the distribution for the payments would be significantly different. Essentially, there's about $240 million that the Power 5 schools are not paying, that they are allocating to the non-Power 5 FBS, the FCS, and the non-football D1s. So these three categories here are overpaying by these amounts based on their percentage of expenditures as compared to what the FBS Power 5 schools are paying. And so that's been the frustration with the other 26 conferences, is that we weren't plaintiffs to the lawsuit. Our student athletes didn't generate this money, aren't going to get this money, and you're expecting us to pay so that you can settle the liabilities you have with your former student athletes. And that's been the pushback and the kickback from the other 26 Division I conferences, is that it doesn't seem fair. The Power 5 has, to this point, not been receptive to arguments about making it more proportional or allocating those obligations in a more rational way. Now, as I note here, A&T's annual liability for the next 10 years, if this settlement is approved, will be about $300K a year. So a little over $3 million that we'll pay in the next 10 years. This will not be money that we have to find and send to the NCAA. This will be money that the NCAA won't send to us. In a typical year, the NCAA sends us between $600,000 and $700,000 across 9 different buckets: for athletic support, for scholarship support, for academic enhancement. There's about 9 different buckets that they send money to schools, Division I schools, to help support their athletics programs. We get, again, between $500,000 and $700,000 a year. For the next 10 years, the NCAA will pull $300,000 of that, approximately. They'll claw it back, and they just won't send it to us. So it'll just be a hit to our budget that we will feel in the NCAA distributions that we will not receive moving forward. Now, it's been conservatively estimated that 90 to 95% of this payback will go to the athletes in 2 sports and at Power 5 schools. And again, these are estimates at this point. 90 to 95% of this $2.8 billion will go to football and men's basketball at the Power 5 conferences. Essentially, we're going to be sending our money to schools that are in the Power 5. So schools in the ACC or the SEC or the Pac-10, Big Ten, Pac-12 will be receiving the $300,000 that we're sending and distributing it to their former student athletes. The again, the projection right now is that for the non-P5, non-FBS, the FCS student athlete, the likelihood is that their payout will be somewhere in the $50 range. Now, we will have student athletes who, if they opt into the settlement, will be able to command more money than that. Think of your Tariq Cohens or your Matt McCain or your Brandon Parker. Those individuals will be able to argue, I think successfully, that they would have commanded a higher market value in the NIL space or in the video game space. And so those athletes from A&T will likely get more than the 50. But for the run-of-the-mill, the golfer, the tennis player, the bowler, the likelihood is that their settlement amount will be about $50 spread out over 10 years.
So could this be part of the reason why there won't be any invites from FBS conferences to FCS schools? A.D. Hilton here went over some of the differences in costs between the two levels. So this could be really a major reason right now that the Mountain West has not given any invitations to any FCS schools, along with other factors. Of course, we've always stated they're going to go the FBS route first before they look FCS. But this could be another reason why they're holding back. I want to take a look here at some comments made by the Big Sky Commissioner. His name is Tom Wisterkrill. I don't know how to say his name. I apologize, Tom. But he said this fairly recently, and I'm going to put this up on the screen. Quote, he says, if you have a $17 million budget and all of a sudden you're out $300,000, that's a heavy penalty. This article goes on to say conference realignment remains a hot topic in collegiate athletics, however, mainly at the Power 5 level. Wistersill noted that the Big Sky keeps an eye on potential movements around the country, but doesn't see those changes coming to the conference, mostly due to financial impact. Quote, if somebody's going to make the move from FCS to FBS, they've got to pay $5 million up front just to do it. Then they've got to invest elsewhere about $8 to $10 million per year at that level, at the average level of the Mountain West. For our schools, an extra $8 to $10 million, I don't know where they get that from. So he's clearly stating it's $5 million plus the increase in budgets that they have, and now potentially money that they're used to getting from the NCAA being taken out of their share. So it's kind of a three-legged stool here in terms of the financial piece of making that jump. And that's where you hear potentially, back to my original point, that if an FCS school is to make the jump, they're going to want and need some help from an FBS conference, again here being the Mountain West. And the Mountain West is waiting to see how much support and help are they truly going to need. Now, I want to go back to a few interviews that we did. Let's go back to A.D. Urias here with Tarleton State. I want to just remind everyone what he said to us just a few weeks ago. Here were his comments about moving from FCS to FBS.
I think a lot of people, regardless of who you're looking at adding, are sitting there waiting, saying, hey, what will the house settlement really look like for all of us? So you go back and you look at, if I'd have told you 5 years ago that Houston was going to be in the Big 12, you'd have said, well, that's never going to happen. So you really don't know what things look like there from that standpoint. But I think conferences are going to look at those schools that have a history of success, and where geography makes a lot of sense. And you guys have seen that forever. And again, the borders don't make sense of conferences right now, but they're all driven by centers of influence.
So again, just to reinforce the one comment he made, everyone is waiting to see what the house settlement is going to look like for all of us, kind of painting that picture that things aren't going to happen quickly. If anyone's going to move right now, we have to wait and see what happens here. The last clip I want to play you is to go back to an interview we did with Bob Thompson. He's the former Fox Sports president, to hear what he had to say about movement from FCS to FBS.
With college football, I think in college football in general has taken a slightly different tact. And again, I think it's because a lot of the major markets are all chewed up, and that is it's what's your alumni base? What are your rivalries? What's your commitment to facilities? Excuse me, what's your donor base? What's your history? What's your student body? All those things. What's your social media appearances? Things like that. All these things now that, I guess to a certain extent we use to justify in our minds that, yeah, that makes sense. They should come up. But I don't know necessarily that the FBS schools are all that thrilled about having a bunch of new FCS schools in. That's why they jack the initiation fees up so much, because what that becomes is it's another mouth to feed at the CFP table.
Yep.
And that's going to be taking money out of somebody else's mouth, and they don't like that. And so, I guess I could see if somebody really wanted to pay the bill and to go ahead and jump up the level, and maybe they agree, I'm not eligible for a CFP payment for some period of time unless I make the CFP playoffs, which I could see. There's some interesting. The Dakotas has always been kind of interesting to me because of the consistently good product that's come out of there over the years. And so I can see it. I don't know that anybody at the networks are going to be jumping up and down on any conference table to add them, but it's an interesting thought. It's not the, I could see there are certain schools that are more appealing to me in the FCS world than the FBS world. So I'll just leave it at that.
So you heard from Bob there, branding, their base, their success as a program, very important, being some of those other intangibles outside of a media market. And of course, Bob views the media market as number one. He was the Fox Sports president, so that will always be number one to him. But he's telling everyone from the FCS side, you need to be able to bring some of those other intangibles. And he actually mentioned North Dakota State in doing that. So what does this all mean now moving forward? Well, to me, it means that any FCS school that is wanting an invite from the Mountain West is going to have to wait a little bit longer. You're going to have to wait until this House settlement is actually finalized, whenever that may be. And we're not 100% sure how long that could take. Remember, from the Mountain West side, they have 8 football members right now. They have 9 when you include Grand Canyon University. So they have 9 members for 2026. 8 football members, so they technically don't have to rush to add anybody right now. I believe, and many people believe, they're going to have at least one more football add, but they don't have to rush to do that quite yet. They have several months to let this play out, let this figure out. We'll see what goes on here with the House settlement. They have time to go to the media market, so they're going to kind of let things, I think, lay low here for a little bit, especially if their next move is to the FCS membership. We'll see what happens. So if you're an FCS school, unfortunately, I would just have to say you're going to have to be patient. I don't think the door is shut. As I said, we certainly know that there were discussions between the Mountain West and Tarleton State, so we know there was a door opened there. I think people are just going to need to be a little bit patient here with other things that are kind of out of the control of both the conference and out of control of these potential members that want to make this move until some things settle down. That's where we're at right now. Hopefully you found this really interesting. I was happy to be able to get some other comments in here from an FCS AD. We had obviously several here. Also hearing some comments from the Big Sky Commissioner I thought was really important. So I think we all kind of at this point know where we're at. It's just kind of a wait and see game here if you're one of these FCS schools. And we'll stay on it here on the mountain. As everybody knows, we do everything Mountain West. We do everything Big Ten. And we do picks for every Big Ten and Mountain West game. We'll be getting a pick episode out here on Thursday as well. If you like what we're doing here, make sure you give this episode a like and subscribe if you like our content. We'll see you all next time on the Big Mountain.